If you're new to Pilates, one of the biggest things that is the hardest to get is some of the concepts and some of the basics. From when we're talking about neutral spine to when we're talking about an imprint to when we're talking about breathing, it can all get a little bit confusing. So I'm going to run through basically a short guide of the basic exercises, the basic positions, and what we're after with the basic positions. So it's not going to be a class per se of let's come up and do 8 sets or 3 sets of 8 or what have you. It's really as a bit of a what we're looking for, what they mean, what they are, and how to improve on them. If you want to follow along and watch, or you want to follow along and actually get down on your mat and do, I'm just doing it up on one of our beds for ease of use, for me to be able to chat to you and talk to you at the same time. So this is my setup behind. If I have no pillows when I'm lying down and we're trying to get you to relax, you might find that you're quite arched through your rib cage, and then when we say put your rib cage down, you might find your tail comes up. So the biggest thing to try and get is neutral. And if we have just a couple of pillows, so I've got one lengthways and one widthways, that's going to just lift my shoulders up and that's going to lift my head up. And you don't have to have pillows, you can have towels, but generally if you come into the class and one of our instructors says you need a bit of head raise, they'll go and get you either a block or something to pop your head under. If they do say that you need a head raise, then maybe get in the habit of bringing your own towel so that you can just roll up your towel or have your towel under your head just to give you that lift. So I'm going to lie down in generally one of our sort of basic start positions. Our pelvis is in neutral, which basically means there's a small gap under my hips or under my waist, and I should be able to feel that the bed has got me relaxed. My knees and ankles are in 90 degrees, and this is what we call crook lying. Okay, so we're going to start really with the pelvis position. So neutral pelvis means that it's not curled backwards and it's not arched. Okay. So we're just going to get started with our class, and we're going to start in what we call neutral. So neutral is I'm not arched forward and I'm not flexed backwards. So my tilt is neutral. So my pubic bone and my hip bones are parallel to the ceiling, and my sit bones are wide. So my muscles in my legs are nice and relaxed. My hips and my knees are now parallel to the floor. When we're talking about an imprint, what we're talking about is that we've got a gentle pressure backwards so that our spine just flattens out onto the bed. And it's not a curl where we lift everything up and we really bend in the middle. It's just a gentle squash. So if you have your hands behind your back and you just gently squash and flatten into your hands, that's what we call an imprint. We've just lengthened the lower back a little bit to support our spine. So if I was in an exercise where I'm going leg long and I'm tending to arch, then I might do a slight imprint just to protect my spine. So that's what we mean by imprint. In neutral, we just gently press our bones of our lower back into the mat, but we're not forcing it down, we're just gently resting them down. Okay, so that covers imprint. With our chest lifts, when we're talking about lifting the chest up, we're talking about tucking the ribs as if they're tucking under our waistband. We're not talking about a traditional curl, because that generally means that we're really flexed and we're looking down towards our belly button. What we're talking about is that we're lifting the chest. So it's a bit more of a lift as opposed to a curl over the top. Okay? And that way when we're doing anything, we're looking more to the top of the knees as opposed to down towards the belly. So generally what will happen when we're doing class is you might be asked to do a tilt backwards as if we're going to go into a bridge. And that tilt should happen from your belly button coming in as opposed to you gripping through the bottom. Okay, so if we just start with gentle pelvic tilts, draw your pubic bone a little bit higher than your belly button. And we're using a breath out to help us. And what happens is it's not a big, massive movement through here. It's just a nice, gentle tilt. So when we're talking pelvic curl or pelvic tilt, it's a small movement coming from the belly as opposed to a big movement coming from the legs. So your legs are nice and relaxed, okay? So breath in to prepare, exhale and we curl, inhale and we release. Exhale and we curl, butt's not doing anything. So we're not seeing any glute squeezes, we're just a small movement, and it is quite a small movement that we're doing. Okay, everything stays nice and sort of relaxed, and we shouldn't see any shunting up and down through the bed. When we're looking at what we call dead bugs, it's just a knee flow up. And what we're after again is that your hips and everything in your pelvis stays nice and still. You just lift the leg up and float it and bring it back down. So breath in to prepare, knee float up and relax it down. Doesn't matter if you do it on an inhale, an exhale down, or whether you do it on an exhale and inhale down. Your instructor will tell you which way they want you to work. The reason that this is quite important is because when you start doing some of the harder exercises, we want you knowing how to float that knee up so that you're working through the deep muscles as opposed to just using your big leg muscles, okay? So it should be a nice float up, as if someone's got a balloon on the top of your knee and they're floating it down. The easiest way to get it is just to float it for a count of 3, hold for a count of 3, lower for a count of 3. If you just lift your legs quite quickly, it's easy to use different big muscles. But if you float for a count of 3, you have to then access slightly different muscles. So exhale, float up for a count of 3, hold for a count of 3, lower for a count of 3. Breathing out, float that leg up for a count of 3, hold for a count of 3, lower for a count of 3. Breathing in to prepare. Exhale, float, 2, 3, take a breath in, 2, 3, breathe out, lower, 2, 3. So they're called dead bugs. Once we start getting the idea of dead bugs, we start loading them by having leg up, hold that leg up, and we float the second leg up. Hold that leg up, breathing out, float your first leg and your second leg. Now this is when people start to really brace and move. So you might take your little imprint here to float your first leg up, float that second leg up, take a breath in at the top. Make sure you're not gripping and bracing through the tummy. Float your first leg down, float your second leg down. And then we're going with the opposite leg, leading. And again, you're going to want your slight imprint here, because what tends to happen is people brace and cheat and they come into an arch. Okay? So that is obviously starting to prepare you for when we start doing this type of work. When you're a bit more loaded, you want to be able to control these legs through the deeper muscles in the hip so that you can float and move well. Okay? So even though these might make you think, well, I'm not doing anything, I don't feel much, I'm just lifting my leg, we're after that you're not wobbling side to side and that you're actually not moving everything. You're able to control with your tummy and control with the deeper muscles in the leg so that later on you can actually use those effectively. Similarly, when we're moving the arms, you might be asked to move the arms. What we want you to do is float the arms up into arm arcs and not arch through the spine, because then what you're doing is you're using your back to get the movement. So we're going to ask you to keep your rib cage nice and heavy as you move, so that when you move the arms, you're connected through here. So that again, when we start doing some of the harder exercises through here, you're actually engaging through here and you're not arching, which can then give you back pain, because that's what a lot of people complain about. If they haven't worked well and they don't know how to access these muscles well, when we start giving you the harder exercises, you then start getting back pain. So again, when you start doing things like your crisscross, you want to make sure that everything's lifting from the right position. You're not then arching. Okay? So with arm arcs, it's a float up. Exhale, and you're lifting the arm but not the ribs, so that you stay connected through here and come back down. Okay? Moving on then to chest lifts, hands go behind the head, and the lift is a chest lift. It's not a pull through the arms, and your elbows stay nice and wide, so you're thinking of lifting the chest by tucking your ribs under your waistband. So again, this is really key when we're starting to get these longer leg positions, that you're lifting and you're not pulling, because when you pull, you're going to get neck pain, and when you curl, you're going to access the wrong muscles. So we want you to think of lifting the chest as opposed to curling and lifting everything up. Okay? So we go breath into the pear. As you exhale, think of reaching your ribs down and under your waistband so that your eye line goes above your knees. Take a breath in as you come down. Exhale, tuck the hips stay stable, ribs tuck underneath your waistband. Inhale down. And then we might get you to press and curl up or lift up. Hands behind the knees, come up a little bit higher. Hold your height as you come down. So what you're starting to do is get a little bit more work and load going on there, so that we can then start loading you from lower down. Okay? So that's some of the basics for when we're down and when we're working through the abs, that we want you to really connect the abs. We want you to really float with the legs so that you start getting the right movement going. Okay? I'm going to turn onto our side and go through some of the work on the side. Okay? Now you might want to keep your pillows as they are for here. We generally don't want you in this position, because what it does is it shortens your waist. And what happens when you shorten your waist is that you start using your back to do the work. So we'll generally want you either on your pillows or having your hand underneath you, so that I'm nice and long. Now if I am sinking through my waist here, we might suggest that you just use a small rolled up towel and you put that under your waist, so that stops you from collapsing. Now with your side series, we're just going to lift that leg up. So we're doing side leg series. We move that leg forward and we move it back without curling and extending. So we're not moving too much through the body. So the short lever version is we float the leg forward and we bring the leg back, or the long leg version is we move the leg forward and we bring the leg back. Now why do we want you stable in this position? Well, it's because later on you're going to start going from there to here, where instead of hanging through here, you're working. And then from there, if I get rid of my pillows, we're going to start propping to here and doing your movements here. And then we start here and moving before we go right the way up to here. Okay? So you can see there's a graduated progression in what we might do. And again, same with when we're working on tummies and into planks, we start in a gentle position and then work up to the more loaded position. So we're going to go back to on your side. If my hands are here, and we're going to go into some rotation. So I'm just going to grab my pillow so it's easier for me to show you. Rotation wise, we're doing what we call book openings. We're going to take a breath in. As you breathe out, we're going to rotate and move backwards, and we're going to follow the eyes with the arm, and we're going to use the tummy to come back. What we're after is that the knees stay still. So what we don't want to see is that, because then you're not actually rotating. So you want to keep your knees in line and still. You imagine that you're drawing a big rainbow with your hand, and you follow that hand forward, but you don't let the knee collapse. And then to come back, you want to come back with your ribs, so you're using your obliques and the arm follows. So it's all about trying to get you a little bit more movement as you reach round and through. You can get a bit of a stretch through here, or we might ask you to stretch so you get a nice long stretch up through the length of your body. But the prime aim is that we're working your obliques. So it becomes an oblique movement and you're getting that rotation, and that's good because you want to be able to reach and stretch behind you, because most of us are in that static position. Stretches out the pecs, stretches out the legs, but also it's a good way to start getting you some rotation. So again, book openings are one of the easy sort of dynamic ways of moving in class. And then to work on things like your back line and your glutes and that type of thing, we might get you doing something called bridging. And bridging for us is flat. So you take pillows away and we start with our legs down, and we're basically moving through a curl through the pelvis, pushing through the tummy and reaching through, and then we roll the pelvis down and lower through the waist. So it's not a bridge where we come up onto shoulders and we arch. It's a bridge where we start with that gentle pelvic tilt and we use the legs to peel up. We should get a stretch through the front of the hips. The knees are reaching over the toes. We should feel it in hamstrings, and we should feel it as a bit of a curl. If you're coming up through here, you're basically going to arch through your spine and hurt your back, and we want you to curl and then lower the pelvis down. Most people, what we're looking for, if we see you doing it wrong, you'll shunt. So you'll notice that your head and your shoulders shunt up. We want you reaching over to the knees. Now, why do we want that type of movement? Because we want you strong through here and here. Most of us spend most of our time sitting, so we don't get that extension work through the back of the legs, and our glutes get weaker. If we have weak glutes, it means that our core gets weaker, and then we end up with poor posture, and then our pecs get tight. So if we can work you through here, keeping the pelvis still, we can then add on single leg variations, we can then add on some stretches, we can then add on some pulses and things that start to make you work your glutes that little bit more. But the key thing is making sure that you're using the right muscles to start with. And then moving back further onto backline stuff, we might do some things in your quadruped position. And quadruped is with your hands under your shoulders, knees are under your hips, and we might start with lifting and then reaching legs behind. Now traditionally you would have seen those as, you know, the old aerobic style workouts. It's not that at all. It's about getting you to control and reaching arm and leg out without you collapsing or arching or cheating or lifting everything too high. What we're after is, can you stay stable in your neutral pelvis, and then can you extend the arm away, the leg away, or arm and leg away, or same arm and same leg away. So what we're doing is looking at your stability. Can you work through your shoulders so your shoulders are strong? Can you stabilize through your pelvis to allow you to move? Because these are the ones that ultimately we go to half plank on, and then we go to full plank on. So again, we need you to be able to go from here and move, but you need to start here and move, so that you know where you're going to. So in terms of the reason that we ask you to come in and do the intro class, and in terms of being able to understand where things are with your pelvis and what's going on, and what does neutral spine mean, and how do you then curl, and when do you breathe, it's all a little bit confusing. The thing is, if we can get you understanding where things are right from the basics, right from the very beginning, all those are going to hold you in good stead. Because if we say, look, take a breath in, come into an imprint, hold that imprint, float a leg up into dead bug, take a breath in, float that arm up into arm arc, you know what that means. If we say come onto your side, because we're going to do book openings, you know that we're going to work you into rotation. And if we say, you know, from there, use your obliques and come back, you know that what those different things are. So with our intro class, if it's all a bit too much for you, that gives you that little bit of grounding. And it isn't about what you learn and what you remember. We're going to talk you through everything anyway. What we need you to do is just appreciate that Pilates moves you a little bit differently, and that we want you to access certain muscles and keep other muscles quiet. That can be a little bit frustrating sometimes, and if you are just not getting it, you need to pipe up in class and go, I don't get it, because it might mean that we just have to teach it a different way. We can say to somebody to lift their arm, and they do that. We can say to somebody to lift their arm, and they do that, or they do that. It's up to us to try and get you to lift it the way that we want you to lift it, that makes sense and gets you the best results. So that was a little intro to Pilates. Like I say, not quite a class, but more a way of, this is what we're looking for, this is where all these exercises and structures lead to, this is how we get you to move so that you can access new, deeper muscles. Rather than using all those big muscles that just move you, we want you to use those posture muscles, the deeper ones, that their job is to support you and to get you stronger and get you longer and get you leaner and support your tummy and work your glutes and get you stable without using your big back muscles, your big hip flexors, your big six-pack muscles, which then mean that you get quite compressed, and although they might be strong, they're not really strong enough to work you at your core deep level. That's what the purpose of all this exercise is. So it doesn't matter if you've done F45 or you do CrossFit or you've been exercising for years and you do the gym. It doesn't matter if you've done nothing and you know you've been a couch potato for years and you've worked in an office and you haven't done a lot. Everybody is starting from the same background. We all need you to understand the same basics. And yes, some people get it quickly, some people take a little bit longer, and 6 months down the track you might go, yep, got it. I know when I first started, because I'm an ex-skater, so I used to skate and compete from being 16 to about, from 6 to about 20, 21. And I was at quite an elite level, but my core muscles were absolutely poor. So even though I was able to do all these things, my actual stability muscles were actually quite poor. And it probably took me 2 or 3 years of working on my core to actually go, oh, that's where it should be and that's how I should be moving. So don't get frustrated. It's one of these evolving learning things. It's one of these ways of moving that you are constantly learning, you are constantly evolving, you are constantly finding out things about your body, about how your body moves and why it does that. Because our body's great at cheating and it's great at doing things. It's like trying to train a long distance runner to sprint and train a sprinter to do long distance. They're both running, they're both moving, they're just two different energy systems, and they're two different muscle type systems, and they're two different ways of moving, both running. So look at Pilates like that. It doesn't matter how fit you are, how unfit you are, it's trying to access new things and access the body's new information and get the body to ground and get that groundwork going. So any questions? Ask us, or feel free, flick me an email at info@corefusion.net.au, or if you are in our classes, then feel free to pipe up to our instructors and they should be able to help you. Thanks for watching.